My name is Tseli Moshabesha. I work at Efficiency Canada as a project manager. Welcome to this session of our Becoming series, where we come together and learn about careers in the energy efficiency sector. We're very grateful to be able to host these sessions through our sponsors. We have two sponsors, Natural Resources Canada and Electricity HR Canada. Both sponsors are key in growing the Canadian energy efficiency workforce, and we couldn't do this without them. The Becoming series is where we meet leaders in the sector and hear their story of how they got started, what skills are important for their role, and advice they have for people looking to follow their footsteps. I want to start this event with a line acknowledgement. I live and work in Montreal, Quebec, and so does Fellipe. Is located on the unceded Indigenous lands of the Moshabesha Nation, who are recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters of Jagage, otherwise known as Montreal. If you haven't heard about it yet, after the event, you can join us on the Discovery Hub. It's an online platform full of courses, events, and networking opportunities to make it easy for you to thrive in the energy efficiency sector. You can join a specific role or be part of that community, and then you'll find training courses, hear from people working in the sector, and you can jump onto a virtual campfire and meet with people. So I'll share the link in the chat right after this. Finally, I'd like to let you know that we'll be recording the session, so you can go back and review anything you miss. We normally record and post the sessions on YouTube within a week, so you'll have that option. In the meantime, we're gonna have a presentation from Fellipe, followed by a Q&A at the end. So please put your questions in the Q&A box as the conversation goes along, and we'll also give you a chance to raise your hand and ask the question virtually if you prefer that at the end. So this month's speaker is Fellipe Falluh. Fellipe is the owner of Retrofit Construction, which is a business that he began in early 2021. Fellipe graduated from McGill University here in Montreal in 2019 with a degree in civil engineering and a minor in environmental engineering. Throughout his schooling, he worked on several projects that focused on energy efficiency and green buildings, but his interest was formally piqued after a professor at the school introduced him to the idea of a passive house. Ever since then, he's been a diehard energy efficiency fan. He sees himself as part of a new generation of builders, fresh cohort of millennials armed with skills and passion for the green economy. And he's here to share his story today and kind of share lessons learned, because he is in a field that's still very new. So it's not common to find many people in the pages of the university textbook that are retrofitters. So Fellipe, thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to hear from you about your story. Please take it away.
Thank you so much for introducing me, and thank you for having me. So I'll gladly share my story on how I became a retrofitter. I don't know if retrofitter really is a term, if it's a real term. I would really say that a retrofitter is like a conscious renovator. It's part of a renovation, and really retrofitting, the definition of retrofitting really refers to the addition of new features and technology to older houses or buildings. Of course, it can be applied to other sectors, but the one that I practice is to houses and buildings. And why retrofitting is so important to me. Really, building now to high standards is something that is somewhat more and more, easier to do. And new construction, as you could see in the charts below, only accounts for 2% of the housing stock annually. There's a really old building stock here in Canada that is in dire need of a retrofit. And the most sustainable building is the one that's already. So in Canada here, not only for greenhouse gas reductions, but also for general comfort, health, and longevity of buildings, there needs to be a huge retrofit mission to aging buildings of the nation. So as I was presented, my name is Fellipe. I started a company called Retrofit Construction, which basically does and consults and executes construction and retrofit projects. So a little bit about myself. I was born in a family of builders. I'm from Brazil originally, and on my grandfather's side, he had a construction company. My dad's a builder too, so really came from a family of builders. But I was never really pushed to me construction, so it was really something that I fell into. In 2011, that's where I had my aha moment to green buildings. There was a project that my family was doing in Brazil with the government. I think it was the Minister of Agriculture and Health and Environment, and it was the lead project, and I was sort of getting into it. I think it was about 14, 15 years old. That's really when I decided I really want to do green building. That's why I used to call it green building. And that's how I got interested in it. When it was time to decide for university, I decided to go to McGill and do a bachelor in civil engineering at McGill University. Back then, I thought that was a normal route to go. If I wanted to be in construction and build, I had to go in civil engineering. So that's the route I went. During my time in McGill, I did 2 exchanges in the same year. I did one in Barbados and one in Iceland in sustainable development. So in Barbados, I had some internship and I had some classes there, but I did an internship with aquaponics. And in Iceland, I was really there to learn about renewable energies. So I had a lot of fun and was really introduced to the world of I guess, sustainable development. So that really piqued my interest. When I finished university, I went on to work for a general contractor here in the Montreal area. And I built a 40-story, which is LEED 2. And it was very fun. It's definitely a different environment. It was my first really construction experience. And I went on to work on other smaller projects after that. But really, that was the main one that I'm really proud about. And in 2021, I decided that I would go about my own way and founded my company and started with a pilot project, which I'll get into later. But that's really how it started. I quit work and decided that I'll try to go and do my own thing. Not that I didn't like the construction that I was doing, but these large scale, they call it heavy, it's residential construction, but it's almost commercial since it's a tower. It's a completely different area of construction. And what I really liked about construction was going for something a bit more small or a residential level. So that's what I decided to do. So a bit more about being a retrofitter. What does being a retrofitter mean? So there's various areas of retrofits. It could be a deep energy retrofit, it could be a shallow retrofit. I mean, there's many retrofits possible. The ones that really got me interested into retrofit in particular was Energy Sprong. Now, Energy Sprong came to me when I was at my last year of McGill. I had a term paper to write, and I decided to write a paper. Well, I decided to go see a professor of architecture, and I told him that I was interested in doing a project on green buildings. And right away, he directed me to saying that exactly as I introduced the subject of retrofits is building new right now is not where we should focus on. Really, where we should focus on is on retrofitting the old buildings. That's where there is a huge potential. And he got me on to the Energy Sprong model, which is a Dutch program of retrofitting, which what we see in the image below, where they do an exterior retrofit that is also prefabricated. And essentially in 5 days, you have a house that is net zero with solar panels. And it's a very interesting concept that works very well there. And so my term paper that I did at McGill was really trying to apply that and doing a case study in Eastern Canada to see if it would work. Along the way, I did a lot of research, and ever since then, really, ever since my term paper, I've been in contact or tried to be in contact with people that are starting or pushing that movement here in Canada. First of all, there is a movement in Alberta called Retrofit Canada. There's a 52 townhouse exterior retrofit that's being done like the Energy Sprong model. Natural Resources Canada also has a project called the Pier Project, which is also very similar. We have also in Nova Scotia the Recover Initiative, and also the Reframed initiative. I forgot where that was from, but they're all Canadian initiatives basically in exterior retrofit. And that's really what got me started onto it, because in an exterior retrofit, you don't have to go and strip the inside. There's no tenant. It's not an invasive renovation. You're doing everything from the exterior. So that's what my main attraction was to retrofits, was trying to push that prefabricated exterior retrofit. So when I got onto it, I decided, okay, that's what I wanted to do. I started looking for a duplex here in the Montreal area, and we found one that was a very good candidate. Its orientation, its solar orientation was really good. Its state was a bit beat up and it needed a bit of renovation, especially the exterior facade. So I told myself, okay, let's do it. Let's buy it. Let's combine. Let's do many projects into one. That was really beginning of pandemic, so we had a lot of time on our hands. So I decided, okay, why not? Let's do it. And my project started, and it started in the design phase, and I wanted to really do or test out this approach that I did my research on. And quickly I realized the first barriers to basically accomplishing my project. I bought a heritage building, and really changing the facades was not something that would be very easy to approach the city to do. And also during the pandemic, construction was really late and behind on materials, and not only the price was high, but also was getting materials in time, and prefabricating panels in time would have been too complicated. So really my project changed into something that was a bit different. So this is the property as it was before, and this is what it is currently. I decided, like I said, not to go really about the way of doing a prefabricated retrofit. I did it a conventional retrofit, and I added also an extension to it. So just a bit more about the duplex. It's an 1895 duplex, very old, very leaky. It was really in horrible condition, and I decided to combine various projects in this pilot project for my business, myself moving out of my parents' house, and really having a revenue property too at the same time. So it was a 3-in-1. And we stripped everything ourselves last year. Started in May 2021, and we're about to move in. We're moving in actually this Friday, so I'm very excited. But after all of this, it was a very challenging experience, and I learned so much. And really, that's why I'm trying to share as much as I can my story. So this project, the certification that I'm going for is one of the Canadian Housing Building Association, called Net Zero Ready, Net Zero Reno Ready, which means that I will not be putting solar panels, but if I have enough space to put solar panels, my building would be net zero. That's why it says Net Zero Ready. So it would consume as much energy as it could produce on a yearly basis. So in terms of scope of work for my project, I touched the main elements of a retrofit, which would be, first of all, the air tightness. That's the most important aspect of it. So my building used to be, the duplex used to be 14 changes per hour at 50 Pascal. And now it's closer to 1.7, which is really drastic difference. And that's really the most important aspect of an energy efficient house. I have all new windows, so triple glazed windows. That's the second aspect of a high performant building. I have a new ventilation system, a central system with a heat recovery ventilator. And finally, I have added insulation. A lot of people think that added insulation is the big of it. I didn't go too crazy on the insulation, as I really wanted to have a better air tightness compared to insulation, and that's what I did. So it was really an interesting project, and I if any of you have any questions at the end, feel free to ask. I'll be happy to share about how I did things. And I just did my final energy efficient test, which basically at the beginning of the project, they come, they do a test, they do an door test, and they model your building, and they give you an EnerGuide score. Now I just did my end test, and I'm really happy with the results, and it looks like I could certify for the certification that I will be pursuing. So I'm really happy about that, that after a year and a half of working hard, I finally got to where I wanted. And that's it about my project. Let me go really about what I plan on doing for the future. So from here on now, what are really my ambitions? So this project really was a lot of fun, and I definitely hope to do that again. Of course, this is my own project. It was a lot of work. To do that again, I'd really have to do it under different circumstances. So I really want to have my business in consulting or managing or also developing projects. So for now, I think I would start in just really consulting, so helping projects from A to Z. If a client wants to retrofit their house, I would take them about the whole process, to choosing the engineers all the way to applying for the grants and telling them what trades to do. Of course, the next step to that would be to also manage the project, manage the trades, and do everything. Of course, it's a bit more. I have to be a bit more involved when that happens. And really, I guess my end goal would be to develop retrofit projects. So buying my own buildings and retrofitting them, the ones that I really think that have potential. But really, my main mission is really to contribute to Canada's retrofit mission, and specifically here in Quebec, where things are a bit slower since our hydro is relatively cheaper. But people have to understand that it's not really about money savings. It's more about, it's a lot about health, comfort, and a long-lasting building, and really reducing your greenhouse gas emissions. And that really is what I preach. And I really think that retrofitting Canada's existing stock is one of the best ways for Canada to reduce their greenhouse emissions. And that's it. I really hope to push that here in Quebec. And if anybody has any questions or wants to ask me a bit more, and feel free.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Fellipe. It's really great to learn a little bit more about you and also see what your vision is moving forward. I love the Quebec-centric and like just contributing to Canada's mission overall, but I do agree that we're a little bit behind in Quebec, so excited to see where you take things. We do have a couple of questions in the chat. The first question is from Matthew DaCosta, who says, how can Energy Strong make a prefabricated exterior cladding for older homes of such vast varieties of sizes and shapes and materials?
Of course, that's one of the problems that for exterior cladding, you have to go with something that's a bit lightweight. So I'm not too sure I understand the question, but really the Energy Strong approach, it's a prefabricated panel that already comes with cladding, and it basically latches onto the old building where you don't even have to remove the previous cladding that was there. You could actually just keep it on, but sometimes it's good to remove it, sometimes it's good to keep it on. It really depends on the case. But the cladding already comes on. One of the main problems is that if you want to go with a brick cladding, you'd have to go with a thin brick. As a heavy brick, you can't really do a prefabricated approach to it, which is one of the problems that I ran into my project, because the facade had to stay brick, so I couldn't go with a thin brick. So that was my main first problem. Let me know if I answered your question, Matthew.
Awesome. Thank you very much. The next question we have is from Sina Mireshki, who says, hey, Fellipe, we liked your story, and it looks like a future plan I'm having in my head since I'm studying at McGill, studying civil engineering at McGill University in Montreal. Can you talk about the cost of retrofitting a project like yours? Also, in comparison to a regular renovation, how difficult is retrofitting both time-wise and financially?
So in terms of costs, I always get that question, and it's really hard to answer. First of all, you have to see the project. It's really project dependent. So building or renovating is already a very expensive investment, right? And really, the costs are impacted by the current state of the house and what approach you go about. If we go about an exterior approach, it's a bit easier maybe to put a cost to it. I've heard that it depends also on the size of the house. So it's hard to give you a number. I didn't do it from the exterior. From the interior, I could give you a bit of an idea of how much it went more than a conventional construction. Since, for example, in my case, I had to gut the house and change the window and add ventilation. But those are all things that if I already was doing a construction, I would have to do all those tasks, let's say. So I would have to add new windows since I had an extension. I would have had to add a mechanical ventilation, and I need insulation regardless. So it's just, let's say I went 15% more on insulation. I went 15% more expensive, let's say, on windows. I went a bit better on ventilation, and I really focused on air tightness. So maybe a bit more money there. So on the grand scheme of things, let's say the project, the whole renovation was like 400,000. Out of that 400,000, I think around 50,000 was of more improvements to bring it to that higher level of it being net zero ready. So it really depends on the project and on the deepness of the retrofit. I call it a deep energy retrofit, but for example, this is a duplex. On the unit above, I did a really a very deep energy retrofit where I gutted everything. On the unit below, it was more of not a shallow retrofit, but it was a medium retrofit in the sense that I didn't open all the walls. I opened certain walls, and I did change the mechanicals and I did change the windows, but cost-wise, I could not do it all. And I still achieved a very good improvement, which is the goal here. It's not trying to achieve the perfect house. Of course, if you're going to try to achieve the perfect house, it's going to be a lot of costs. So that's my answer, a long answer for costs. Like it really, it's project dependent.
Awesome. Thank you very much. We have another question from Edward J, who says, what are some of the standards that you look to for passive homes? What are the challenges when approaching retrofits and compliance to these? For example, changes to stud-off centers from 16 to 24 inches.
For example, for my house, certification wasn't really something that I was really aiming towards. It wasn't a necessary thing. It was just a plus if I could get a certification out of it. Certifications do cost a bit of money. And there's a bunch of certifications that you can do. And then depending on the project, you can go and the project and the budget, you can choose one that is dearest to you. My favorite ones for renovation are really the Retrofit by Passive House, the CHPA by the Net Zero Reno by the CHPA. And those are pretty much it for renovations. And in terms of changes for framing and everything, from 16 inches to 24 inches, that's something that's pretty, when I spoke to my engineer about it, it was something that he was pretty comfortable with. Because in terms of construction, we're already there. We already know how to do it. So it's really the case of bringing that to retrofits, which is a bit harder. But the engineers were pretty okay with it, and the knowledge is out there. So now is a good time to really apply it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. We have another question from Matthew DaCosta, who says, during a retrofit, how do you minimize the disruptiveness and provide accommodations to the lives of families, example, people with kids living in older homes?
So disruptiveness, really the best, if you're doing an exterior retrofit, or like I said, the energy sprung approach, it's a 5-day operation. Of course, that's in theory. Let's say a 2-week disruption where, yes, there will be some interior disruption, but on the exterior approach, that's really the best thing of it, is that there's really no tenant disruption. So that would be the best approach to do. In my case, for example, it was me living in, so it was empty. So I had to do it from the interior, and that was a really long disruption. It was 5 months, 6 months, but that also entails, because it's construction, right? It's interior renovation. It's not even, at the end, it's not even just energy efficient construction. It's really normal construction that takes time.
Mhm.
But that's the main advantage of exterior renovation. So that's it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And 5 days does not sound that bad for renovation. Yeah. Okay, so we have a question from Eric Ta, who says, there seems to be a strong demand for retrofitters who can do home energy retrofits, but a bit of a lack of skilled contractors to supply that demand for sustainable retrofits. What do you think is the best way to get more contractors to supply sustainable solutions?
Honestly, the best way is, I think, a lot of this movement, the best way to make it doable or feasible is to get the governments involved and give out grants and also training to these contractors. Now, I do agree that there is a lot of untrained labor or unskilled labor in those construction, and that's something that I definitely ran into in my project, where you get very old carpenters, let's say, that have been doing something for 45 years, and then a young 20-year-old kid comes and tells them how to do things, and they don't really like it. And that's the part where you have to educate and share the word. And that's why I think that education, that's the first, and rolling out programs to make it viable. But there definitely needs to be a discussion. And at the end, really every worker that came here understood the general mission of the house. And by doing so, they were a bit more attached to the project and a bit more willing to understand what they're actually doing. That's the whole point. It's building consciously. So it's not just doing something because you're doing it, but why put, Matthew was saying, why put studs at 16 or why at 24? You have to explain that to them, why. And you have to explain to them why they should actually take that second more to seal a corner or to put the tape correctly. So it's just a question of educating people and not being afraid to do it.
That makes sense. Thank you. The other question we have is from Anu Brati, who says, Canada Green Homes grants provide some financial support, which is not necessarily availed. But what do you think would be an add-on business case for mass retrofits? What kind of paybacks do you see for net zero energy ready retrofits, considering all the grants available?
So let's say in my case, in terms of grants, let's say for the whole project, I'm going to get about $30,000 back. So I have some part that is from the provincial government, which is Renovation here in Quebec. I have some parts which are coming from the Canadian Green Home Grant, which is around $5,000. And on my mortgage, when I took an insured mortgage with they do have a money back on the insurance premium paid after you do certain types of retrofits. So I get another like $7,000 or $8,000 from that. So considering that, in my point of view right now, like I'm taking as just plus, not trying to base my financial case on these grants. But the moral of the story is that the grants are really low, and to have or fund mass retrofits, there needs to be government implication for that. That's when I was speaking about Energy Sprong and how it was working so well in the Dutch context. The way it works so well, it's because of these, not only just in grants, but in terms of loans or interest-free loans, which I see that are starting to appear. I know Toronto has some interest-free loans for renovations, for retrofits, sorry. So government implication is something that really has to happen for to make mass retrofits viable, and it's to their interest too. It's better for the housing stock, the aging housing stock of the government.
Definitely is. Yeah. Alrighty, thank you. We have 2 more questions in the chat, and we have about 9 minutes. So if anyone has any burning questions, please add them, and hopefully we'll get to them in the end. So the next question is from Terry Adamson. Terry says, I've been participating in discussions for the coming codes for existing buildings with energy targets aiming for net zero. A common comment is cost will be out of reach for most homeowners that often want to update their interior living spaces instead. How do you approach the conversation of energy retrofit versus a new kitchen or bathroom, etc.?
So that's really hard to a client. In my context, for me, that discussion I had it basically with my girlfriend, where I had to voice to her why it was important to put money behind the wall when you don't see it, instead of, let's say, a new kitchen or a new bathroom. So when you go about an interior retrofit, of course, there is that interior renovation. That's why I was where I want to bring out the exterior retrofits like that. You don't change anything inside. Whatever's inside the house stays inside the house, stays like that. Of course, like I said, you can't just see like my project was, let's say, $400,000 and that's what it was just to retrofit. Of course, like maybe on added cost was maybe like $50,000 that was added to retrofitting. And if you do have the money to build and to do all of these renovations, the business case is that you should, and that extra money is what you need to make a business case out of. That extra that you're going, what is that bringing you? So that's 50,000, that's real comfort, real health. That's the most important things. Lower greenhouse gas, which is what it's being eco-conscious, right? That's where your money is going.
That's true. Thank you. And a follow-up actually linked to that. Sorry. We have a question from Matthew DaCosta who says, how much money do you save per year on energy costs as a result of the 400,000 retrofit? Do you notice any improvements in air quality? I think you answered that, but is there anything you'd like to add?
So it's hard to really give it, especially here in Quebec, right? Very hard to go about how much I'm saving per month. First of all, I'm moving in like this week, like I said, so I didn't get any energy bills yet. So I'll have to answer that in a couple of months, but I'm not expecting enormous savings. I think for my house, I cut around 80% of the consumption, which is already huge. So in that sense, yeah, I'm saving a bit of money, but I shouldn't be considering that 400,000 that I'm saving. It's not on 400,000 that I need to look at. It's that extra that I went more, like that 50,000 I keep talking about, to make it energy efficient, that I should compare it to see that payback.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And then we have a final question, or what I think is a final question, from Mark Subit, who says, are you aware of other exterior retrofit companies or contractors in Quebec or Canada?
So, not really. Yes, exterior retrofits is like a paneled retro. If you mean a paneled retrofit, not really. Not in Quebec. There's a lot of retrofitters in Quebec, mostly out in the townships or in the Laurentians. So I see a lot of people starting their thing, and very established contractors too, mostly in cottages because it's easier to attend, and that's mostly new construction too, and some retrofits. But I don't think I know of any contractor that really just focuses on retrofits here in Quebec. But I do know like the companies that I mentioned, which are Retrofit Canada and the Recover Initiative and the Reframed Initiative. they do roll out some projects, but they are more not for profit, so they do more governmental and government funding and social housing. So there's not really for a particular, there's not really much people doing that, especially here in Quebec.
Awesome, thank you. And so another question came up while you were talking, so we're not done yet. Man says, how has your experience been when applying for these incentives? Was there a lot of turnarounds?
Honestly, I'm in the process of applying. I was actually doing that last week. Not too bad. I was expecting something worse. Really, they just want proof. So you need to have all your receipts. So that's just, if you're organized, it's really not that bad. So you need your receipts, you need your technical sheets, and you need pictures of before and after in the walls and whatever. And if you have all of that, it's something like, it's a weekly thing. Now, I didn't get the money, so I don't know how long that's going to take. I've heard that may take a while. So that's why I told you I'm not really basing my project on getting that revenue, or it's a plus for me. But it hasn't been that bad, but I know that money takes a bit of time to.
Alrighty, well, thank you very much, Fellipe. Are there any final words you'd like to share or anything you'd like to share before we pop off? We have about 2-3 minutes left.
No, honestly, thank you so much for everyone for tuning in. And if you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to discuss with you guys. And really, don't be afraid to ask any questions. Sharing my story and being there to help others share this mission with me is something that I'm really proud of doing and interested in doing, because it's something that I wish somebody was there for me when I was starting. And actually, there were a lot of people. The community is very helpful. And every time I asked a question or wanted to reach out to someone, they were always very receptive. And I would really like to return that favor. So if anybody is interested or has any questions of whatever sort, I'll be happy to discuss with you guys.
Alrighty. Thank you very much. So everyone, you heard Fellipe. Please reach out. Don't be shy, because it's the only way to learn. And really grateful to you, Fellipe, for taking the time to chat with us. And also, I just think it's really cool that you're also looking to reach back and help other people in the sector to make it a little easier, because when one of us wins, we all win. So thank you to everyone. And I will be ending the webinar, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.